Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Dorothy Dalton, and I'm joining you from Brussels. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much. Today, we're going to talk about leadership tips for running remote teams. And the tips I'm going to share with you are very practical and hands-on, things that you can start doing tomorrow in your daily work life, but also take with you into the workplace when we come out of our lockdowns. And you can practice them in real life or in future remote working arrangements. So just to give you a little bit of my background, I've worked in HR consulting for many years. I have a focus on recruitment, training, mentoring, and coaching. And I work with organizations that support gender balance and diversity and inclusion strategies. So I'm looking forward to this session. Thank you. You've probably all heard this line, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And one of the things that organizations with the best leadership strategy in the world, if their culture isn't in line with their strategy, culture always wins. So one of the most important things to do, particularly when you're working remotely, is to make sure that you've got everybody on side and all your teams are in line with your leadership culture. And even in crisis, there is opportunity. And I think of this, I don't want to apply pressure on you because there's a lot of pressure anyway. And one of the things that I want to share with you, some things that you can do that you can, and I use the word nudges, so it's just like a little nudge on the elbow to make you think of other ways to do things, but it's also an opportunity for learning. And all of these tips are really easy, that it's not hard homework or anything like that. Now, one of the things that a lot of people think when they're setting up a remote or distributed team strategy is that it's about the tech, and clearly it is a little bit about the tech. What you need to do is to think that it's also about the human element. So I was working with an organization last week, and they had masses of tech problems. But because the manager was so effective and so inclusive, they actually didn't mind. So in difficult situations, if you take a more inclusive and human approach, then you are going to be ahead of the game. And here are the nudges that we're going to talk about. People, this is a quote from Maya Angelou, that people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you make them feel. And the story that I was told last week was a client who was very stressed, was asked by his manager how he felt, and he said, fine. And the manager said, listen, none of us are fine. This is all terrible. Tell me what's really going on for you. And that made an enormous difference to that person. So it's really about finding out what is going on for your team. And you heard me mention the word pulse in the beginning. Pulse, imagine taking your pulse. You're taking the pulse of your team. You're taking your own pulse. And I want you to put these answers in the chat. If you were going to describe your mood, where would you be? Would you be red? So you're not feeling great, you're a bit pessimistic. Would you be an amber? Would you be okay, some concerns? Or are you green? Are you a green light and you're great and you're full of energy? So just to make it a little bit more fun, I'm going to ask you to find a song that best describe your mood. So in the chat, and Ali's going to keep an eye on this, put in green. Okay, I didn't put my songs in because probably you would never have heard of them. But when I think of green, I think of Katrina and the Waves. So Walking on Sunshine, or whatever song suits you best. You've got some concerns, things can only get better, whatever works for you. So just take a minute and put your song and your mood in the chat box. And Ali will take it and check it out. I can see the orange light flashing a lot, so that means you're all working hard, giving me your songs and your mood. And this is a great tool for checking in with your team. and particularly in these very difficult times. Ali, have you got any news for me?
Absolutely. So I think the consensus out there is that the majority are yellow. We've got some couple of greens, couple of reds, probably more greens than reds out there. A few songs in terms of "Don't Stop Believing," a lot about hope, about positivity. So as ever, I think a middle to upbeat group you've got there.
Okay, well, I mean, that's great, because you've been in this situation for a month, and we might at the end just loop back and see what songs you've come up with and see if it's anything that I've been with. Okay, excellent. So we're just going to do a little bit of revision on diversity and inclusion, so I make sure that we're all on the same page. And there are lots of metaphors around diversity and inclusion, and generally I don't like most of them. This is one I do like. It's from Andres Tapia of Corn Ferry, and it's "Diversity is the mix and inclusion is making the mix work." So what is diversity in terms of your organization, which is government leadership? So it's about the different types of learning styles, different personalities, different academic backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, different learning abilities. So there are lots of different ages, different genders. So there are lots of ways of making a group more diverse. And then inclusion is making the mix work. How are you going to do that? And so this is going to be the focus of what we're going to do today. So diversity is a fact. It's something that generally is quite measurable and visible. And inclusion is how people feel. The other thing I'm going to go over with you is just a little bit on the business case, not too much because we only have 30, 40 minutes. But I just want to, because a lot of people will say, why we're a government organization, do we need a business case? And it's really about making your organization more effective. So what I've done is, because we don't have time to go into too much detail, I've put in some of the resources at the bottom, and you can either make a note or you can go back. I don't know if you'll get the deck as a PDF, and you can go back and check it out. This is a great resource from Josh Burson when he was at Deloitte. Inclusion is better for business, better for your organization. It's going to result in a 30% higher revenue. Okay, maybe you're not generating revenue, but it's about organizational output and success. So once again, about profit and organic growth, and this in your organization will be around how goals will be measured and the goals of your business. And even in organizations which are not profit and loss driven, you still want your organization to be successful. Inclusive organizations, and this is very applicable to you, and this is also from the same report from Burson, 6 times more likely to be innovative and 6 times more likely to anticipate change and respond effectively. And this is really important, I think, particularly going forward, because no one really knows what the new normal will be. The other thing, and once again, this is very important for a government organisation and leadership within governments, inclusive teams drive decision-making twice as fast with half the meetings, okay? So can you imagine a life with half the meetings? That sounds really great. Sounds great to me anyway. And your decision outcomes improve by up to 60%. And this is a really great study from Hacking Diversity with inclusive decision-making from an organization called Clover Pop. The other thing which is really important, and you may have covered it in your other leadership courses, is about psychological safety and belonging. And there are 2 pieces of research which I would really advise you to look up when you've got time. One of them is from Google, Project Aristotle. And when they were looking what made an effective team, one of the things they discovered was that psychological safety and a feeling of belonging actually came above all the other elements. So it's about being able to bring your whole self to the workplace. It's about being able to speak up without fear of judgment or recrimination or obviously reprisals. The other one is from the Centre of Inclusion for Deloitte again, and they identified belonging as being core to effective teams in terms of innovation, retention, collaboration, reduced sickness and absenteeism, increased productivity. So you want people to feel psychologically safe and secure on your teams. Now, how are you going to do that when they're, you know, it's easier to do when they're in the same room or the same building, but you know, when you're all dispersed, how are you going to do that? And the other thing that you want to do is to think about diversity of thought, okay? And there is a tendency when we're hiring to recruit for what we call cultural fit, okay? So that is when people fit into your team, okay? And when we talk about biases, it means generally they're people who think like us, they act like us, they've been educated like us. Everybody is the same. But as this is a great quote, when everyone thinks the same, no one is thinking. So you really want to encourage people to speak up, even if it's more difficult for you as the leader to manage that. And that is one of the reasons why people prefer to be with people who are like them. And that's because it does make life easier. So what I'm calling on you to is to be a brave leader and to start to think of encouraging your teams to speak up and to feel secure. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is perception and blind spots. This is a great line. We don't see things as they are, but we are. And there's a really good book here, The Hidden Biases of Good People. And I've worked with a lot with organizations, even organizations within the EU, talking about unconscious bias. And the important thing is to recognize we all have biases. You can't get rid of them, but you can learn to manage them. So it's really important that you have some reflective moments and try and find out where your own biases are. If you haven't had unconscious bias training, really important, get your organization to do some. Because 85% of us, and I put me in that group as well, we all think we are less biased than our colleagues, okay? And that is simply not the case. So pay attention to that. Right, I'm moving on to the first of my leadership tips, okay? And the first one, it starts with you, right? And most of us are so busy, particularly, you know, where we are at the moment, managing childcare and homeschooling and, you know, illness and getting a permit to go for groceries once a week. So life is particularly challenging. So we don't have much opportunity to think about ourselves, but when you get a moment, I would really advise you to try. So one of the things that's important to find out and to understand about yourself is your own leadership style. There are no rights and wrongs, okay? It's just, are you a hands-on, like to be in the thick of it? Are you someone who just likes people to come to you when you have a problem? It's just important that you know what your style is. It's also important to know what your communication preferences and styles are, because particularly when you're working remotely, this is a source of concern. And I worked with someone also last week where the gentleman was dyslexic, and he told me that his boss just like bombarded him with 200 Slack messages in an hour. And he said, I'm dyslexic, I can't process that. So you have to, not only do you have to find out, we'll talk about the team, but you have to find out how you communicate with your team. Okay, what is your style? Do you like to little and often, or do you like to just have one big meeting or town hall meeting or daily? What is it that you like to do? Then stress point and triggers. And this is really important because we're working in extremely stressful times at the moment. So what is it that makes your blood boil or your pulse rise? Okay, check it out and notice it, write it down. Find out what the situations are. You know, how do you react? What's going through your mind? What emotions are you feeling? and then make a note if it happens to again and see if there's a pattern. Because when you know how you behave and how you are going to react, it makes it much easier for you to step back and modify that behavior. If you've got any questions on any of these, just pop them into the chat, and Ali will come back to them at the end. And the other thing is, if you don't know, ask for feedback. Okay, I'm sure your wives and or your partners and kids will be delighted to give you feedback. But you can also ask your team, and don't say, you know, was that great? You know, because what are they going to say? Of course, they're going to say it's great. Ask them how it was. How did they receive something? So always ask open-ended questions: who, why, what, where, when, and how, to get a better answer. If you give people a yes or no option, they're probably going to end up agreeing with you. Now, this brings to how well do you know your team? First thing is, you don't make assumptions. And I'll illustrate this with a story from recent weeks where a client had a team member who had a parent that was living with them whose carer could now no longer access the home. So this meant that the carer had to leave their job, or the client had to leave his job and go and take care of the parent who had like a little granny flat in the garden. So that meant that he was away for times from his desk. Okay, and the boss said, I didn't know that. Why didn't he tell me? And I said to the boss, why didn't you ask? So it's really important. Ask questions. Find out what's going on for them. You know, what do I need to know about your circumstances that is going to help me understand how we're going to work better as a team? Okay, what do I need to know? You know, how many kids have they got at home? Is everybody healthy? Do they have any particular anxieties outside in these very difficult circumstances? And when you get back to the office, it may not be the same in terms of seriousness, but it's a question you could ask. What is going on for your team? And one of the things that everybody says is that leaders need to be more open with their teams than expect their teams to be open with them first. So you have to give a little to receive. Now, this is about managing expectations. Now you can see that I've done a little line here. Expectations pre-coronavirus, okay, it's a straight line. So that was maybe a bit optimistic. Maybe there were a couple of bumps. Now in coronavirus times, we can see how it is. Okay, it's all over the place, right? So, you know, you've got the ups and the downs. You know, sometimes you want to cry and sob and tear your hair out. Other times you've got no idea whether you're up or down. Okay, sometimes you get mad. So it's really important to manage expectations. So talk to your team. Discuss what is possible in their current circumstances. And to link back to the stats I showed you at the beginning about people who are working at home who are forced to, the people I've spoken to are saying that those with kids, elder care responsibilities, other domestic situations, or there's a great word now called co-spacing, which is working around the kitchen table with your kids and your partner. So discuss what is possible. And people, particularly people who are homeschooling, or who have elder care responsibility, even those with domestic support, are saying that they are not fully productive. Okay, what I'm hearing from people who don't have kids at home or other responsibilities, it's not quite life as normal because they're feeling stressed, but it's that they're certainly able to be more productive than anybody else. Now, I don't know if you have this. I think you might have, because I worked with some other people last week from the UAE, and a lot of organizations have software monitoring, okay? And I would suggest particularly, I'm not a fan of it generally, because I think inclusive leadership is based on trust and results. But I would advise you to consider relaxing that. And particularly, as I said, in the person who was looking after his parent in the granny flat, that person was booked as being away from their desk for an hour. Okay, so finding out what's possible, understand what's going on. Really, do you really want to be monitoring every minute, or do you just want the results? And the other thing to do is you might want to think about extending deadlines. And you may want the Q1 returns for, I don't know, tomorrow, but find out if that's possible and how you're going to make that happen, and what other things can they let go to meet those particularly high priority deadlines. So it's managing expectations, managing priorities. Now, the next thing, which is really interesting, is support systems. And this applies from the most senior leader to even someone who is at entry level. People have different levels of requirement. And one of the things you might want to do is think about organizing your team into pods or cells, whatever you want to call it. I have someone who called them a nest, doesn't matter. And this means that everyone has somebody, a buddy, okay, that they can go to. And it can be a buddy or a mentor. Senior people, actually, surprisingly, need this as much as junior people. And one of the reasons is that they are used to having this massive infrastructure around them, and all of a sudden they are the person who's responsible for fixing the printer. And whereas a more junior person might be overwhelmed by work priorities, isolation, all of these other things, senior people also have issues. So I've worked with organizations that do what we call reverse mentoring. So you have junior people mentoring senior people, and that's a great relationship where quite often, I'm stereotyping now, which is a bit naughty, but I will. Generally, junior people are more familiar with the tech. So if you've got issues, then they can help with tech. So break your team into small manageable groups where they can support each other, and there is a peer networking or mentoring system going on. Now, the other thing here, which is really important, is communication style and preference. And by now, because you've been doing all this reflection, you know what your own style is, right? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Okay. Are you someone who can manage for long periods on their own and it doesn't bother you, or are you an extrovert and you feel uncomfortable without outside contact for energy? What are your team like? What are the personalities like on your team? I prefer oral and written communication. Just mentioned the person who was dyslexic struggled with written communication. Okay. What are the preferences of your team, and how does that align with your own style? And the other thing is, there are lots of other ways to, there are so many channels now. We've got Slack, we've got, you probably might have an intranet, you've got WhatsApp, you've got email, you've got all of these other functions. Which one are you going to choose? And find out what works best for others. Now, one of the things that has come out in recent research, and this might be helpful to you, when organizations were targeted, or they did a pulse for finding out how often employees wanted to hear from their leaders, in fact, when I estimated about once a week. In fact, I was wrong. Most organizations, most employees wanted to hear from their leaders almost every day or every second day. And the other thing that is interesting to note is that leaders tend to be concerned about managing the business and employee health, whereas employees are more concerned about job security. So you've got a lot of anxiety on the employee side. And I think what they're looking for is to know that their futures and organization are in capable hands. So if you don't know, going back to the what I said previously, don't make assumptions. Ask them, how often do you want to hear from me? Okay, see what they say, and you might get a range of responses. So pick a medium and decide what works for you. How often you want to be in touch with your group, even if it's just to ask them, what their mood is. okay, and how they're feeling and what song, you know, reminds them of their mood. This is really important, mindful communication. And this is something that none of us are good at, and I would put myself in that group too. And research shows that 56% of emails are misunderstood. Okay? So that means that only 44% of your communication is going to be received correctly. Okay? That is not high. So you need to show intention. Now, I have a colleague here in Brussels who says emojis are great for that. I think they can be, but you've got to be better than me about pushing the right button on that. And you don't put, you know, the laughing one for the crying one. So I think it's about communicating intention. You know, what is the tone of your communication and what do you intend to communicate? And the other thing that you can do is a lot of these platforms now have voicemail options, and I quite like that. And it also, I mean, research shows that we can speak 4 times faster than we can type. So first of all, it's quicker. It also conveys your intention and your tone better than an email. And particularly for those with learning differences, it can be easier for them to process. Now, Zoom. Don't know if you're like me, but I've spent more time on Zoom in the past month than I had on my whole entire life, and I've been a user for quite some time. It can be a source of stress, okay? And one of the things to do is to, once again, going back to respecting differences, people's differences, and, you know, understanding their circumstances. Not everyone will live and have accommodations that are appropriate for remote working. I've worked with people who live in shared accommodation. Maybe they have kids running around with dogs or difficult circumstances. Maybe the boss might live in some palatial villa. So you have to be very mindful of differences, okay? The other thing is that people get called to endless Zoom or video conference meetings. So one of the things that I would advise you to do is most platforms offer a record. So only invite the people who are going to be actors in your meeting, the people who are really necessary. And if you want to send out a recording, you can do. And then if you've got someone who'll even flag up, okay, you know, minute 15, minute 30, whatever it is, then that's so much the better. And the other most important factor, and we call this Zoom Goon, is not to have back-to-back meetings, okay? Allow people 50 minutes in between so that they can decompress, they can process what's gone on before, they can collect their thoughts, and they can prepare for the next one. Because I find being on an online meeting is actually more tiring than if you're being in a room. There's less chat, you can't get cues from people's body language, and you have to be much more alert. And I'm going to give you a little inclusion tip in Zoom, is the use of the background image. If you have the right computer, you can put your own image behind. So that allows you to, I don't know, have a beach or, I don't know, a library behind you, whatever it is. So if people don't feel comfortable showing their accommodation, that's one thing. Not everyone feels comfortable talking, okay? So you can offer the option to communicate with chat. And not everyone wants to put their camera on, not just because of the background, because they feel uncomfortable talking to camera. So once again, find out what's going on for people, what makes them hesitant, and try to create an atmosphere where people feel more relaxed. And if you've got any questions on that, put those in the chat. I don't know how you work in your office, but quite often if you're a leader, you might have an office and people tap on your door, or they see you walking down the hallway and they say, hey, have you got a minute? And you can't do that. when you are working from home. So create some opportunities where people can roll up, put it in your diary, where they can either make a slot for a one-on-one, or they can have a group where it's just where people can have that open door meeting. Well, it's not open internet meeting with you about things that are on their mind. Sometimes people will come, sometimes people won't. Doesn't matter. The most important thing that you've got this window, and you can send out a little alert. It is easily done on Zoom, where it's a regular meeting. Send out an alert, and you just, hey, I'm going to have an open line for 30 minutes. Anybody want to drop by and say hi, have a coffee, whatever it is that you think needs addressing. Then fun and games. This is quite hard, to lighten the load, to make the atmosphere less stressful. And there are ways that different organizations are bringing in some fun and lightening it up. Playing charades, that's the English, or charades if you're American. There are quizzes. There's Word Feud, which is like an online Scrabble, which is one of my favorites. Show and tell. I know one organization that invites people to their town hall meeting. They have a weekly meeting or daily meeting, whatever it is. They bring an object that describes, tells something about them, describes their mood, whatever it is. I've got other clients who have coffee. We stop for coffee at 11, and if their kids are home, you bring the kids, and it's just very relaxed. Another one is Pictionary. That's kind of fun. And there's the link for the app where you draw a picture and somebody has to guess what it is. So one of the things I'm suggesting to you, that in the office there are lots of ways to interact, to make teams more collaborative, to make teams gel, and to bring more human elements of collaboration. And it's important because they don't come up, if you like, independently or spontaneously when you're working remotely. So you have to program and make them and build them into your system. Then the last one, self-care. And this takes me back to this, when you go on a flight, when we start taking flights again, I hope. And the cabin attendants always tell you to put your face mask on first. And the reason they do that, or your oxygen mask, so the reason they do that is that if you are not taking care of yourself, you cannot take care of anybody else. And that applies in the office. So I haven't given any specific tips because everybody does different things to make themselves relax. There's a lot of content out there about the things that different organizations are recommending in terms of making sure you take some daily exercise, eating correctly, meditating or thinking if you feel that you want to, making sure that you get enough sleep. So whatever it is that works for you, that gets you into a place where you are fit and well, mentally and physically, where you are able to take care of, obviously, yourself, your families if you have them, and your teams. And there's nothing I have said to you today that you cannot take with you to the workplace of the new normal, whatever that is going to be. So what I would like you to do is to put some answers in a chat, and then we're going to group together and see what comments you've made, what questions you've got. And I'm going to ask you to put in one inclusive leadership behavior that you're going to implement tomorrow or next week, but you're going to implement, that you commit to do, because if everybody does one little thing, okay, then life will be quite different for everybody. So Ali, are you going to open up the chat and take a look and let me know what's going on?
Absolutely, yes. So chat is very much open for people to share their plans. I think it might also be interesting to hear from the group in terms of what are other tips or what are other practices that they've been putting in place themselves that they might like to share with their colleagues. Maybe there's something.
Exactly. Okay, brilliant. Because these are only suggestions. You might be already doing cool things that will are great ideas. So just share in the chat what it is that you're going to either do today and tomorrow that I've shared with you, or ideas that you have that I can pass on to other people, because all of this is new for everybody. Okay, I can see the orange light flashing. Anything?
Yes, absolutely. So people, I'm just reading what people are writing. So I think the idea of checking in with the team, I think having that touch points in terms of early morning, having an open session where people can come in. I think knowing yourself, I think is really a great point. And actually trying to make it a bit more fun. So some of those connections around fun and games are things that people are connecting on as well. Oh, here you go. This is a lovely idea. We've done Priya Parker's 7-song salon, where each person shares 7 songs that have helped shape their life. It serves as an autobiography and is bringing us a bit closer together whilst we're apart.
Okay, I love that. Who made that suggestion? That's a really great idea.
Megan Chong.
Okay, that's great. So, I mean, I think anything that encourages people to share a little bit about their backgrounds in a way they don't feel as though they're going through a job interview, I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sarah raises a really good point as well, that saying it's harder to step away from her laptop at home and pressured to always be online and reply to emails, as everyone has an assumption that because you're home, you're free 24/7, which I think is a really interesting observation, because it's such a new way of working that actually takes up quite a lot of extra time. As you mentioned, Dorothy, it puts extra pressure. What's your thoughts on boundaries, Dorothy? How does one manage literally working at home?
It was quite interesting because that one comes up all the time. I think it's about managing expectation. And I think if you're a leader and you sit down with a team, you find out what's going on for them, what their circumstances are, you know what your priorities are, and they know what deadlines they're going to meet. So it's about what is going to work for them and what expectations they have. Okay, so that is the leadership behavior. Okay, but I know that a lot of people, particularly if they're worried about their jobs, they feel that if they leave their device, it might reflect badly. I think you have to agree that with your manager. And I think when you're talking to your manager about what is going on for you, the responsibilities that you have, then it's important that you say that, that you're happy, you want to get the job done. But I mean, you have to be able to put your device down, turn it off, and just switch it off.
I think the other tip that I've seen done quite nicely is people putting at the bottom of their emails saying, I'm currently working flexibly to try and manage homeschooling as well as work. I may respond to you outside of your normal hours, but please don't feel the pressure to respond. So almost trying to set the precedent through a sort of, setting the tone by writing a sort of a disclaimer almost at the bottom of your email.
Yeah, and I think, that's all tied into managing expectation. But obviously you're going to get emails and communication coming from vendors or clients or, other people. So I think that, if you do say that to expect delays or you're doing your best, I think that's a really good solution.
So, and we've got some other great ideas in here as well, just in terms of releasing stress through doing blind scribbling. Great initiative, having Zoom Doom limited to 2 meetings a day maximum for staff. I think a lot of people are saying Sarah says, thank you very much for your inputs, but also time to take care of myself. It's been a consistent theme. Dorothy, I know everyone's different, but what are your tips for self-care?
I think sleep, making sure that you get enough sleep. I think exercise, and I know that's difficult particularly if you don't have outside space. And I'm working with people in different geographies who are not able to go outside, but they don't have a garden and they're not able to go outside. But I think, I mean, one of the things that you'll find is that there are so many organizations that are offering, yoga classes online. You can do all sorts of things online that didn't exist before. So check to see you get your physical activity. I'm not a doctor, but I have read that you're supposed to keep very hydrated. I think you eat properly, and to make sure that you take those gaps in between the sessions, because otherwise I think it can be crazy making. And then, if you like meditation, or, I feel very feel for people who are very physically very active and they're restricted now. I think you just have to find a way to, within your apartment or on your balcony, if you've got a balcony, where you can, try and get some movement.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Dorothy. I know that there's some great things out there, particularly on stuff like Dubai calendars, doing Instagram calendars and all sorts. But thank you very much, Dorothy. That was, and there's lots of things.